The morning started like any other Tuesday at the United Nations building in New York. Secretary General Maria Santos was reviewing budget reports when the air in the main assembly hall began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Security guards rushed toward the disturbance but stopped when a large silver cube materialized in the center of the room. The cube was perfectly smooth and about the size of a small car. It hummed softly and glowed with a pale blue light that made everyone's skin look strange. For several minutes, nobody moved, and the cube split open like a flower blooming, revealing a crystal screen that flickered to life. Words appeared on the screen in broken English that looked like it had been translated by a confused computer. Greetings, lesser beings of the third rock from Yellow Star. You have been selected for great honor. The Galactic Council invites your species to participate in the Great War Games. This is chance for glory and entertainment. Prepare your strongest fighters. Competition begins in 30 Earth rotations. The message repeated in several other languages, though they were just as poorly translated. Then the screen went dark, and the cube sealed itself again. Most world leaders thought it was an elaborate prank. The Russian ambassador suggested it was American technology. The American ambassador blamed the Chinese. The Chinese ambassador said, "Nothing but took many pictures." Security experts examined the cube for 3 days, but found no way to open it. Or understand what it was made of. Then the aliens arrived. It happened during an emergency session about the mysterious cube. The assembly hall was packed with delegates arguing about what to do when 3 impossible things appeared in the air above their heads. The first looked like a giant crystal butterfly with too many wings. The second was a cloud of green gas that somehow stayed together and moved with purpose. The third resembled a jellyfish made of light that pulsed different colors as it floated. The crystal butterfly spoke first, its voice coming from everywhere at once. "We are ambassadors of the Galactic Council. You received our invitation. Come to explain the rules of the Great War Games." The gas cloud swirled and formed words in the air. "Your species shows promise for entertainment value. The games will test your military capabilities in controlled environments. Victory brings honor. Defeat brings shame, but no permanent harm." The jellyfish creature flashed bright yellow and spoke in a voice like singing. 12 species participate. Challenges test strategy, individual combat, resource management, and adaptation. The weakest species faces cosmic embarrassment and reduced trading privileges. One brave delegate from Brazil raised her hand. "What if we refuse to participate?" The 3 aliens looked at each other in ways that suggested confusion. The crystal butterfly fluttered its wings. "Refusal is not computed. It's all species desire. Glory and testing of strength. Why would you refuse opportunity for greatness?" The gas cloud shifted to a darker green. "Perhaps they fear showing weakness. This is normal for primitive species." The jellyfish pulsed red. "Their military capabilities appear limited. We expect early elimination, but amusing efforts." In the following days, world leaders held emergency meetings. Military experts studied everything they could find about the aliens and their technology. Scientists tried to understand how the visitors had appeared without any spacecraft or energy signatures that Earth's instruments could detect. General Kim Tae-won of the Korean Space Force was attending one of these meetings when he made a suggestion. That changed everything. We should not focus on matching their technology. We should focus on what they do not expect. "What do you mean?" asked the American Secretary of Defense. "They think we are primitive. They expect us to fight like they do, but we do not know how they fight. They know nothing about how we really fight." The room fell silent as people considered this. Aliens had demonstrated superior technology, but seemed to know very little about human nature or human history. They spoke about warfare like it was a sport or a game show. Within a week, every major nation had submitted candidates for Earth's team. The selection process was unlike anything the military had ever done. Instead of choosing the strongest or most decorated soldiers, they looked for people who could think differently under pressure. Captain Lee Dae-yeon was selected as team leader after an unusual test. He was given a scenario where his unit was surrounded by superior enemies with better weapons and no chance of escape. Instead of planning a heroic last stand or a desperate breakthrough attempt, he spent 2 hours studying the enemy's behavior patterns and then negotiated a temporary ceasefire by convincing them he had information they needed. The test controllers expected him to fail or fight. They did not expect him to turn the scenario into a completely different kind of problem. His team was chosen with the same philosophy. Sergeant Park Minji was a demolitions expert who had once stopped a terrorist attack not by defusing a bomb, but by convincing the bomber that his target was the wrong building. Lieutenant Kim Yeho was a communications specialist who spoke 7 languages and had a talent for understanding what people really meant when they talked. Private Cho Soyoung was officially a medic, but she had engineering training and a strange ability to fix broken things with whatever materials were available. Corporal Han Wubin was listed as a sniper, but his real skill was seeing patterns that other people missed. When the team met for the first time, Captain Lee gathered them in a small room and asked a simple question. "What do you think these aliens want from us?" "To test our fighting ability," said Sergeant Park. "To see if we are worth their attention," suggested Lieutenant Kim. "To entertain themselves," offered Private Cho. Corporal Han was quiet for a long moment. "I think they want to feel superior. They want to watch us fail so they can feel good about themselves." Captain Lee nodded slowly. "Then we should not give them what they want." The aliens returned exactly 30 days after their first visit. The Crystal Butterfly announced that Earth's team would be transported to the first challenge location immediately. The gas cloud formed words explaining that they would face other species in a series of tests designed to measure military effectiveness. The jellyfish creature pulsed with what might have been amusement. "Your primitive weapons and tactics will provide interesting contrast to more advanced species. We expect you will learn much before elimination." As the human team prepared for transport, Captain Lee gave them their first mission briefing. "Remember, they think they know what we are. They think they know what we can do. Our job is to show them that they do not know anything at all." The transport beam activated, and 5 humans disappeared from Earth, carrying with them thousands of years of human military history that the galaxy was completely unprepared for. The transport beam deposited the human team on red sand that stretched to the horizon in every direction. The sky was orange with 2 small suns beating down mercilessly. Captain Lee Dae-yoon checked his equipment while his team oriented themselves to their new environment. "Welcome to Cathara," announced a floating screen that appeared in front of them. "This is your first challenge. You must capture and hold 3 strategic points for 72 hours. Resources are limited. Their teams have already begun. Good luck, primitive species." The screen showed a map of the area. 3 towers rose from the desert at different points, forming a triangle about 10 kilometers wide. Each tower had a control room at the top that teams needed to occupy. The first team to hold all 3 towers for 24 consecutive hours would win. Sergeant Park Minji pulled out her scanner and frowned. "Captain, I count 11 other teams already moving toward the towers. We are the last ones here." Lieutenant Kim Yeho was monitoring radio frequencies. "I can hear communications from at least 6 different species. The Velkari are using heavy assault tactics on the North Tower. Something called the Vessian Collective is coordinating a multi-pronged attack on the East Tower." Captain Lee studied the map carefully. Every other team was rushing directly toward the towers, exactly as expected. "What do you see when you look at this challenge, Corporal Han?" Han Wubin lowered his binoculars. "I see teams fighting over obvious targets while ignoring everything else. They are thinking about the towers, not about the desert." "Exactly." Lee pointed to several small structures scattered around the area. "Private Cho, what do those buildings look like to you?" Cho Soyoung checked her scanner readings. "Supply depots, sir. Water, ammunition, equipment. But they are not marked as objectives, because the aliens think controlling towers is the only way to win," Captain Lee said. "Sergeant Park, I want you to examine the sand." Lieutenant Kim, "Monitor all communications and map their tactical patterns. We are not going to fight for the towers yet. The other teams were already engaged in fierce battles. The Velkari were massive bear-like creatures with energy weapons that could melt rock. They simply walked toward the North Tower, destroying everything in their path. The Deshan collective moved like a swarm of insects, perfectly coordinated but predictable in their patterns, while laser fire and explosions echoed across the desert. The human team spent their first day doing something none of the other species expected. They explored. Sergeant Park discovered that the red sand contained high levels of silicon and trace metals. With the right chemical reaction, it could be turned into a crude but effective explosive. She also found that certain areas of sand were looser than others. It's perfect for creating hidden pits or unstable ground. Lieutenant Kim mapped the communication patterns of every team. He learned that the Velkhari used simple, direct orders. The Shen collective shared thoughts instantly, but could not handle unexpected information. A species called the quantum architects spoke in mathematical formulas that followed predictable logic patterns. Private. Cho examined the supply depots and found something interesting. They were automated and responded to proper identification codes. More importantly, it could be reprogrammed if someone understood their basic operating system. Corporal Han studied the other teams through his scope and noticed something crucial. Every species fought the same way they always fought. The Velkhari used overwhelming force. The Veshans used coordinated swarms. Nobody adapted their tactics to the desert environment or to their enemies' weaknesses. On the second day, the human team began their real strategy. Lieutenant Kim started broadcasting false radio, chatter on the frequencies used by different teams. He sent fake distress calls, false tactical updates, and contradictory orders. Because he had studied their communication patterns, could make the messages sound authentic to each species. Sergeant Park began setting traps around the supply depots using the explosive sand mixture she had developed. But her traps were not designed to kill. They were designed to confuse and frighten. When the Velkhari sent a patrol to resupply, they found their depot surrounded by small explosions that made noise but did no real damage. Hidden speakers played recordings of human laughter. The Velkhari patrol returned to their main force reporting that the depot was haunted by invisible enemies who mocked their victims. Private Cho had reprogrammed 3 supply depots to deliver random items instead of what was requested. Teams asking for ammunition received medical supplies. Teams requesting water got communications equipment. The automated voices now spoke in broken English with phrases like, "Have a nice day" and "Thank you for your service." Corporal Han used his sniper rifle not to eliminate enemies, but to disable their equipment in ways that seemed like mechanical failures. A Veshan communication array suddenly stopped working. A quantum architect probability calculator began showing impossible results. Each incident was small and appeared accidental. By the end of the second day, paranoia was spreading among the other teams. The Velkhari suspected sabotage but could not find the saboteurs. The Vessian collective was receiving conflicting information that disrupted their coordination. Several smaller teams had abandoned their positions to investigate the malfunctioning supply depots. On the third day, Captain Lee finally made his move toward the towers, but he did not attack them directly. Instead, he sent Lieutenant Kim to the North Tower, where the Velkhari were positioned. Kim approached under a white flag, broadcasting on their military frequency in their own language. "Velkhari warriors," he called out. "I bring information about the invisible enemies who have been attacking supply lines. My captain wishes to propose temporary cooperation against this common threat." The Velkhari commander was suspicious but agreed to listen. Kim explained that his team had also experienced mysterious attacks and suggested sharing information. During the conversation, T casually mentioned seeing unusual movement near the East Tower, where the East scenes were positioned. At the same time, Sergeant Park was approaching the East scene position with a similar story. She told them about energy weapon signatures near the North Tower that matched Velkhari technology. She suggested that the Velkhari might be using some kind of stealth technology to attack other teams while maintaining their public positions. Within hours, the Velkhari and Veshans were fighting each other instead of defending their towers. Other teams, confused by the false intelligence and equipment failures, began making desperate moves that left their positions vulnerable. The human team moved quickly to occupy all 3 towers while their enemies were distracted. They did not win through superior firepower or technology. They won by turning the challenge into a completely different kind of game. When the victory announcement came, the Galactic Council observers were silent for a long time. The crystal butterfly finally spoke with what sounded like confusion in its voice. The human team has achieved victory through methods not anticipated in our simulations. Their approach did not match any known military doctrine in our databases. Captain Lee smiled as he looked up at the floating observation platform. That is because you do not have any humans in your databases yet. The transport beam activated to take them to the next challenge, but Captain Lee noticed something in the way the aliens looked at his team. The condescending amusement was gone. In its place was something that might have been the beginning of concern. The second challenge took place in the darkness of space around a dying red star. Massive asteroid fields drifted between the human team and their objectives. The task was simple in concept, but deadly in execution: disable or capture enemy vessels. While protecting their own ship, Captain Lee Daeon studied the tactical display as their small transport vessel approached the combat zone. 11 other ships were already engaged in battle, firing energy weapons that lit up the darkness like deadly fireworks. Each species had brought their most advanced combat vessels. "The Valkyrie ship is 3 times our size," reported Corporal Han Wubin from the sensor station. "The Veshan vessel appears to be some kind of living organism, and that crystalline ship must belong to the quantum architects." Lieutenant Kim Yeho was monitoring communications traffic. "Captain, they are not talking to each other anymore. After what happened on Cathara, several species have formed a temporary alliance. They specifically mentioned wanting to eliminate the humans first." Sergeant Park Min-ji checked their weapon systems and frowned. "Our ship has basic defensive capabilities and standard projectile weapons. Everyone else has energy shields and plasma cannons. In a direct fight, we will lose quickly." Captain Lee nodded thoughtfully. "Then we will not have a direct fight. Lieutenant Kim, can you access the emergency communication frequencies?" "Yes, sir. But why would we want to do that?" "Because we are about to have an emergency. Within minutes." Lieutenant Kim was broadcasting a distress signal on multiple alien emergency frequencies. His message was carefully crafted to sound like a damaged ship with a dying crew. He had studied each species' language patterns and cultural responses to create the most effective plea for help. "This is the human vessel Harmony," he transmitted in broken Valkyrie. "We have suffered catastrophic damage from asteroid impact, life support failing, crew injured. Requesting immediate assistance from any ship in range." The response was immediate. 3 different vessels changed course toward the human ship. The Valkyrie, despite their aggressive nature, had strong cultural rules about rescuing ships in distress. The Thessian collective viewed helping other beings as a basic biological imperative. Even the cold quantum architects calculated that assisting a distressed vessel would improve their cosmic standing. "Multiple ships approaching," reported Corporal Han. "The Valkyrie are coming fast. The Veshans are dispatching a rescue pod. The quantum architects are scanning us with some kind of medical beam." Captain Lee smiled grimly. "Sergeant Park, are your special charges ready?" "Yes, sir. Attached to our hull in precisely the right locations. It will disable incoming ships." Without destroying them, as the first rescue ship docked with their vessel, Sergeant Park activated her magnetic charges. The devices attached themselves to the rescue ship's hull and sent electromagnetic pulses through their systems. Weapons went offline. Navigation failed. Life support continued working, but the ship was effectively disabled. "What happened?" Valkyrie rescue crew demanded as they boarded the human ship. "Asteroid damage caused feedback in our systems," Captain Lee explained with perfect sincerity. "It appears to have affected your ship as well. Very unfortunate." Before the Valkyrie could respond, Private Cho Soyoung was already examining their crew with medical scanners. But her real purpose was to study their biology and technology. She asked innocent questions about their ship's systems while treating minor injuries that did not actually exist. The Theshan rescue pod arrived next, and the same process repeated. Lieutenant Kim greeted them with gratitude and cultural phrases that showed respect for their customs. While they were distracted by his perfect pronunciation of their formal greetings, Sergeant Park disabled their vessel with another electromagnetic pulse. The quantum architects were more suspicious. They demanded detailed explanations of the human ship's damage before offering assistance. Captain Lee provided them with precise technical data that was completely accurate but utterly meaningless. He described fictional cascade failures and impossible system interactions using real scientific terms. The quantum architects, who relied on mathematical logic for everything, spent valuable time trying to calculate solutions to problems that did not actually exist. While they were focused on their equations, Corporal Han studied their ship's design through his targeting scope and identified key vulnerability points. Within 2 hours, the human team had disabled 3 enemy vessels, without firing a single weapon, but Captain Lee was not finished. Lieutenant Kim opened a channel to all remaining ships in the combat zone. "Channel open, sir. Attention all vessels. This is Captain Lee of the human ship. We have successfully rescued 3 disabled ships and their crews. We are willing to offer assistance to any other vessel that requires help with technical difficulties." The response was immediate and angry. The remaining alien ships realized they had been tricked. Energy weapons began charging as they moved to attack the human position. "Now we run," Captain Lee announced calmly. But the human ship did not flee in panic. Instead, it moved through the asteroid field in a pattern that seemed random but was actually carefully calculated. Corporal Han had been mapping the asteroid positions and found a route that would force pursuing ships into specific positions. As enemy vessels chased them through the rocky maze, Sergeant Park activated her final surprise. She had attached small charges to key asteroids during their initial approach. The explosions did not destroy the asteroids, but changed their orbital paths in precise ways. The pursuing ships found themselves trapped in a cascade of moving rocks. They had to choose between continuing their attack and avoiding collision. Most chose survival and broke off their pursuit. The few ships that continued chasing the humans discovered another unpleasant surprise. Lieutenant Kim had been monitoring their communications and learning their tactical procedures. He began broadcasting false targeting data on their own frequencies, causing their weapons to miss by increasingly wide margins. Private Cho used her medical knowledge to identify the biological stress patterns of different species. She broadcast sounds and light frequencies that caused discomfort to specific aliens without affecting others. Valkyrie pilots began suffering from headaches. Dacian crew members experienced nausea. The final stroke came when Captain Lee announced their surrender. "All ships, this is the human vessel," he broadcast on open channels. "We cannot continue running. We formally surrender and request prisoner of war treatment according to galactic law." The alien ships moved to accept the surrender, but Captain Lee had one more surprise. As they approached, he activated a signal that simultaneously disabled all the ships they had rescued earlier. The supposedly disabled vessels suddenly came online, human crews at their controls. The human team had not captured 3 ships. They had captured 3 ships and learned how to operate them by studying their systems while pretending to offer medical aid. Now they had 4 vessels under their control and detailed knowledge of alien technology. The remaining enemy ships retreated in confusion, unsure whether they were facing surrender or attack. When the challenge ended, the Galactic Council was silent for a long time. Finally, the Crystal Butterfly spoke with what sounded like disbelief. "The humans have achieved victory through deception, manipulation of rescue protocols, and exploitation of cultural traditions. These tactics are not covered in our military databases." The gas cloud ambassador swirled nervously. They turned mercy into a weapon. They used our own honor codes against us. The jellyfish creature pulsed dark red. They did not fight a space battle. They fought something else entirely. Captain Lee looked up at the observation platform with the same calm expression he had worn throughout the challenge. "We fought a human battle." As the transport beam activated for the next challenge, Captain Lee noticed that the alien observers were no longer watching with amusement. They were watching with fear. The third challenge location was an industrial moon called Farah 7. covered with abandoned factories and metal refineries. Smoke drifted between rusted towers that reached toward a gray sky. The objective was urban warfare at its most brutal. Control the central communication hub while eliminating or neutralizing all other teams. Captain. Lee Daeun stood on a platform overlooking the maze of buildings and noticed something different immediately. The other teams were not spreading out randomly as they had in previous challenges. They were coordinating their movements and sharing information. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Kim Yeho from his monitoring station, "I am detecting joint communications between the Valkyrie, Veshans, and Quantum Architects. They are forming a permanent alliance specifically to counter our tactics." Sergeant Park Minji checked her equipment and weapons. They have also changed their approach. Instead of rushing toward the objective, they are establishing defensive perimeters and moving slowly. They are trying to deny us the opportunity to divide them. Corporal Han Wubin studied the enemy positions through his scope. 8 teams. Total, this time. They have positioned themselves to cover all approaches to the communication hub. And sir, they are staying together in larger groups instead of spreading out. Captain Lee nodded slowly. Aliens had learned from their previous defeats. They were adapting their tactics to counter human strategies. This should have been concerning, but instead, Captain Lee looked almost pleased. "Private Cho, what do?" "You see, when you look at their new formation," Cho Soyoung adjusted her scanner and studied the tactical display. "They are thinking defensively now instead of aggressively. They are scared of us, so they are being careful." "But sir, being careful means they are moving slower and thinking about us instead of thinking about winning." "Exactly. They are no longer fighting to win the challenge. They are fighting to not lose to us. That changes everything." Captain Lee gathered his team in an abandoned factory near their starting position. Instead of moving toward the communication hub, they spent the first 4 hours doing something that confused all the alien observers. They began manufacturing, using the industrial equipment left behind in the factories. Sergeant Park started producing small devices that looked like communications equipment, but served entirely different purposes. Private Cho modified medical scanners to analyze the chemical composition of everything around them. Lieutenant Kim built signal amplifiers that could intercept and modify alien communications in real time. Corporal Han used precision tools to create custom ammunition for his rifle, but these were not bullets designed to kill. They were designed to deliver small payloads of various substances at exact distances. "What are they doing?" Crystal Butterfly Observer asked the other Galactic Council members. "They appear to be building something, but our sensors cannot determine the purpose." The gas cloud ambassador swirled anxiously. "They are using industrial equipment for military purposes. This violates no stated rules, but the concept is not in our databases." "They are improvising?" The jellyfish creature pulsed nervously. "They are creating new tools for purposes we cannot predict." After 4 hours of preparation, the human team finally began moving toward the communication hub. But their approach was unlike anything the aliens had seen in 3 challenges. They did not try to avoid detection. Instead, they announced their presence loudly and clearly. Lieutenant Kim began broadcasting on all alien frequencies in every language he had learned. His message was simple and terrifying. "This is the human team. We know where each of your groups is positioned. We know how many soldiers you have. We know what weapons you are carrying. We know which species each of you belongs to. You're coming." To talk, the alien teams had expected stealth, deception, or surprise attacks. They had not expected the humans to walk directly toward them while providing a detailed intelligence briefing about their own positions. "Valkyrie, Team Alpha. You have 16 soldiers positioned in the steel processing plant on grid. Reference 7. 7 Charlie Kim continued his broadcast. Mission Collective Unit 3. Your biological sensors indicate stress levels consistent with fear response. Quantum Architect probability calculators. You are currently processing a 97% certainty that this broadcast is part of a deception strategy." The aliens realized with growing horror that everything Kim was saying was completely accurate. The humans somehow knew exact details about their positions. their numbers, their equipment, and even their psychological states. But the truly frightening part came next. Private Cho began her own broadcast, speaking to each species in terms of their biology and culture. "Velkhari warriors," she said in their formal military dialect. "Your current defensive position places stress on your lower back muscles due to the elevated firing positions you have chosen. Your species suffers from joint pain when maintaining such postures for extended periods. I recommend adjusting your stance to avoid injury." She was right. Velkhari soldiers were indeed experiencing discomfort exactly as she described. "Veshan collective members," Cho continued, "your hive mind communication is being disrupted by electromagnetic interference from the factory equipment around grid reference 9 Alpha. This is causing confusion in your coordination patterns. You may wish to relocate to maintain proper mental connections." The Deshans checked their systems and found the interference exactly where she said it would be. "Quantum architect units," Cho added. "Your probability calculations are based on insufficient data about human psychological profiles. Your certainty percentages are mathematically accurate, but contextually meaningless. You are solving the wrong equations." The quantum architects ran emergency checks on their calculation systems and discovered errors in their foundational assumptions about human behavior. As the human team approached the first alien defensive position, Captain Lee began the most unsettling part of their strategy. He started negotiating with each species separately, using knowledge that should have been impossible to obtain. "Velkhari Commander Thexnine," he called out as they approached the steel processing plant. "Your military record shows excellence in offensive operations but limited experience with defensive urban warfare. Your current position violates 3 basic principles from your own tactical manual. I believe we can reach an agreement that allows both our teams to advance without unnecessary conflict." The Velkhari commander was so surprised to hear his name and service record that he actually agreed to listen. Captain Lee proposed a temporary ceasefire that would allow both teams to advance toward the communication hub without interfering with each other. But the agreement Captain Lee offered was carefully designed to seem reasonable to the Velkhari while creating problems for their allies. The ceasefire terms required the Velkhari to maintain specific positions that would block the Decion advance routes. Meanwhile, Sergeant Park was approaching the Decion position with a different offer. She had studied their biological communication patterns and learned to mimic their chemical signals. When she spoke to them, her words carried subliminal messages that felt trustworthy to their collective consciousness. "The Shen Collective," she said, "your coordination advantage is being reduced by interference patterns that the humans can help you eliminate. We propose sharing technical data that will improve your communications in exchange for passage through your perimeter." The technical data she offered was accurate and helpful, but it also required the Deshans to adjust their communication frequencies in ways that would accidentally interfere with quantum architect probability calculations. Most disturbing negotiation came when Corporal Han spoke to the quantum architects. He had been studying their mathematical thinking patterns and learned to present information in ways that seemed logically irrefutable. To their artificial intelligence systems, quantum architect units, he transmitted, "Your current strategy optimizes for victory probability against human tactical patterns documented in your databases. However, your databases contain 0 actual examples of human military tactics. You are calculating solutions to theoretical problems. We offer to provide real data samples that will improve your accuracy." The data samples Han provided were genuine examples of human military thinking, but they were carefully selected examples that would teach the quantum architects to expect certain patterns while hiding others. Within 6 hours, the human team had reached the communication hub without firing a single shot. They had negotiated separate agreements with 3 different alien alliances, and each agreement had been designed to create conflicts between the alien teams themselves. The Velkhari found themselves blocking the Shen movement routes according to their ceasefire terms. The Yashens discovered that their improved communications were disrupting quantum architect systems. Now, the quantum architects calculated that their best strategy was to eliminate the other alien teams before dealing with the humans. By the time the aliens realized what had happened, They were fighting each other while human team calmly occupied the communication hub and declared victory. Silence from the Galactic Council observation platform lasted for nearly 10 minutes. When the crystal butterfly finally spoke, its voice carried a note of something that might have been fear. The humans achieved victory through. The fourth challenge was delayed for 3 days. Captain Li Dayan and his team waited in a holding area aboard a massive space station while the Galactic Council held emergency sessions. Through the transparent walls, they could see ships from different species arriving and departing in patterns that suggested urgent diplomatic activity. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Kim Yeho from his monitoring position, "I am detecting encrypted communications between all participating species. They appear to be discussing rule modifications for the remaining challenges." Sergeant Park Min-gi was examining their equipment when she noticed something unusual. "Captain, our gear has been scanned repeatedly while we were sleeping. Someone has been trying to understand our technology." Private Cho Soyoung looked up from her medical readings. "The alien observers have also been taking biological samples from our living area. Hair follicles, skin cells, anything we might have left behind. They're studying us now, just like we have been studying them." Corporal Han Wubin was watching the alien activity through the observation windows. "Sir, something has changed. The way they look at us is different. Before, they watched us like we were entertainment. Now they watch us like we are a threat." "Captain," Lee nodded thoughtfully. "They are beginning to understand what we represent, but I do not think they understand it completely yet." On the third day, the Crystal Butterfly Ambassador arrived with a new set of rules. The announcement was formal but carried undertones of nervous tension. "The Galactic Council has reviewed the previous challenges and determined that certain tactical approaches have created unfair advantages," the alien announced. "New restrictions have been implemented to ensure a balanced competition." The list of new rules was extensive. Teams could no longer communicate with enemy forces during combat. Medical assistance could not be offered to opposing teams. Industrial equipment could not be modified for military purposes. Most importantly, detailed intelligence gathering about enemy species was now prohibited. Captain Lee listened to the entire list without expression. When the announcement ended, he stood up slowly and looked directly at the crystal butterfly. "We accept the new rules," he said simply. "When does the challenge begin?" The fourth challenge took place across 17 different star systems simultaneously. It was the largest and most complex military exercise the Galactic Council had ever organized. Each team would control multiple ships and coordinate operations across vast distances. The objective was to capture and hold key positions in each system while preventing other teams from doing the same. What made this challenge different was the scale. Instead of facing 11 other teams, the humans now faced a coordinated alliance of all remaining species working together. The new rules had been designed specifically to prevent human tactics from being effective. "All teams except the humans have formed a single alliance," reported Lieutenant Kim, as their ships moved into position. "They are sharing resources, intelligence, and tactical coordination. We are facing essentially one massive opponent with the combined resources of 11 different species." Captain Lee studied the tactical display showing all 17 star systems. Enemy forces outnumbered them by more than 50 to 1. Their combined technology was centuries ahead of human capabilities. The new rules prevented most of the psychological and cultural tactics that had won previous challenges. "Sir," said Sergeant Park, "this appears to be designed to guarantee our defeat. Even with our best strategies, the numerical disadvantage is overwhelming." "Private Cho, what do you think our opponents expect us to do?" Captain Lee asked. "They expect us to try the same tactics we used before and fail because of the new restrictions. They expect us to be frustrated and make mistakes." Captain Lee smiled for the first time since the rules had been announced. "We should not do what they expect. Corporal Han, I want you to coordinate our ship movements, but do not try to capture any objectives." "Sir, we are going to split up and operate independently in different systems. But our goal is not to win according to their rules. Our goal is to show them what happens when humans are not playing games." Within hours, the human team had separated across multiple star systems. Each team member operated alone with their own ship and limited resources. To the alien observers, it looked like a desperate strategy that would guarantee defeat even faster than staying together. But something unexpected began to happen. Lieutenant Kim was not trying to capture objectives in his assigned systems. Instead, he was studying the communication networks that connected all 17 systems. He discovered that the alliance between alien species required constant coordination across vast distances. Their unity was actually their weakness, because it required predictable communication patterns. Sergeant Park was not engaging enemy forces in direct combat. She was analyzing the industrial and resource infrastructure of each system. She found that the 17 systems were economically connected in ways that created dependencies. Disrupting one system would create cascade effects in others. Private Cho was using her medical knowledge to study the biological requirements of different species across multiple environments. She discovered that the alliance required each species to operate in conditions that were not optimal for their biology. Their cooperation was causing physical stress that would accumulate over time. Corporal Han was not fighting battles. He was mapping the movement patterns of the entire Allied fleet. Across all systems, he found that coordinating such a large force across multiple star systems created mathematical constraints that limited their tactical options. Captain Lee remained in the central system and began implementing a strategy that none of the aliens had anticipated. He started broadcasting detailed analyses of everything his team was discovering. Attention all ships, he transmitted on open channels. This is Captain Lee of the human fleet. We have now completed our analysis of your combined civilization. The response from the alien alliance was immediate confusion. Captain Lee continued his broadcast while his team continued their individual operations. Your communication network requires 17 primary relay stations operating at 94% efficiency to maintain coordination. Lieutenant Kim has identified 12 critical vulnerabilities in this network. Your resource distribution depends on trade relationships between systems that create economic dependencies. Sergeant Park has mapped the cascade failure points that would disrupt your entire economic structure. Your biological requirements for different species create stress factors when operating in alliance formations. Private Cho has documented the physiological costs of your current coordination strategy. Your fleet movements follow mathematical patterns that become predictable at scale. Corporal Han has calculated the tactical limitations these patterns create. The alien alliance began to realize that while they had been focused on preventing human victory in the challenge, the humans had been conducting a comprehensive analysis of their entire civilization. The game had become secondary to intelligence gathering on a scale that defied comprehension. But Captain Lee was not finished. We have also analyzed your individual species in detail, he continued. We understand your cultural values, your biological weaknesses, your technological dependencies, and your psychological patterns. We know how each of your societies functions and how they interact with each other. The broadcast continued for 6 hours. Captain Lee provided detailed assessments of each species' military capabilities, economic structures, social systems, and technological bases. The information was so accurate and comprehensive that it clearly demonstrated something terrifying. Humans had been studying Galactic civilization with the same systematic approach they applied to warfare. The alien alliance stopped trying to win the challenge. Ships began withdrawing from combat positions as species. Representatives demanded emergency communications with their home governments. The realization was spreading that these humans had not just been participating in military games. They had been conducting strategic intelligence analysis of the entire galaxy when the Galactic Council called an emergency halt to the challenge. Captain Lee made one final broadcast. We have demonstrated human military capabilities under controlled conditions with significant restrictions. This represents approximately 5% of actual human strategic potential. We look forward to the final challenge. The silence that followed lasted for 3 days. When communications resumed, it was not to announce the next challenge. It was to request diplomatic negotiations. The Crystal Butterfly ambassador appeared on their ship with what appeared to be a formal delegation rather than game officials. The Galactic Council wishes to discuss terms for ending the war games early, the alien announced. We would like to negotiate Earth's immediate membership in galactic civilization. Captain Lee looked at his team and then back at the ambassador. The Crystal Butterfly's wings flickered in what might have been nervous movement. We realized that you were not participating in our games. You were studying us. And we realized that if this is what humans do when they are playing, we do not want to discover what humans do when they are serious. The transport beam activated one final time, but now it was taking them to diplomatic chambers rather than another battlefield. The war games were over, but Captain Lee suspected that the real negotiations were just beginning. The diplomatic chamber was the largest enclosed space Captain Lee Dae-yoon had ever seen. Representatives from 14 different species sat in a circle that could have held a small city. The crystal butterfly, gas cloud, and jellyfish creatures were there, but now they were joined by beings that looked like living trees, creatures made of flowing metal, and entities that seemed to exist partially in other dimensions. Captain Lee and his team sat at a simple table that looked tiny compared to the massive alien seating arrangements. But despite being outnumbered thousands to one, the humans were clearly the focus of everyone's attention. The crystal butterfly spoke first, its voice carrying none of the condescending amusement from their first meeting. The Galactic Council formally requests that Earth accept immediate membership in our civilization. We offer full trading rights, access to our technology, and representation in galactic government. A tree-like being that introduced itself as a representative of the Elder Forest Collective added its own voice. We also offer unlimited access to our libraries, which contain the accumulated knowledge of millions of years of galactic history. The flowing metal creatures spoke in harmonious tones. The metallic synthesis wishes to share our manufacturing technologies and resource processing methods. One by one, each species offered gifts that represented their greatest achievements. Advanced medical knowledge, transportation technology, energy generation methods, and scientific discoveries that could advance human civilization by thousands of years. Captain Lee listened to each offer politely before responding. These are generous gifts. What do you want in return? The chamber fell silent. Finally, the gas cloud ambassador swirled nervously and formed words in the air. We request that humans agree to certain limitations when dealing with other galactic species. What kind of limitations? The jellyfish creature pulsed yellow, which Captain Lee had learned indicated nervous honesty. We would like humans to promise not to use certain tactics when interacting with other species. The methods you demonstrated during the war games were ... disturbing to many of our civilizations. Lieutenant Kim Yeho leaned toward Captain Lee and whispered something. Captain Lee nodded and stood up to address the assembly. I appreciate your offer, but I must decline the limitations you have suggested. The reaction was immediate. Several alien representatives began speaking at once in languages that sounded alarmed. The crystal butterfly's wings fluttered rapidly. Perhaps you misunderstood, the butterfly said carefully. We are offering your species advancement that would normally take millions of years to achieve. In exchange, we ask only that you refrain from using psychological warfare, cultural manipulation, and intelligence-gathering techniques against peaceful species. Captain Lee looked around the chamber calmly. I understood perfectly, but you are asking us to limit capabilities that we consider basic military competence. What you witnessed during the war games was not our advanced warfare. It was standard, tactical thinking applied to what we viewed as training exercises. The silence that followed was complete. Even the background humming of the space station's systems seemed to stop. Sergeant Park. Minji stood up and activated a portable display device. If I may, I would like to show you something. The display showed a timeline of human military history. It began with images of primitive weapons and basic tactics, then progressed through thousands of years of warfare evolution. Medieval sieges, naval battles, mechanized warfare, nuclear weapons, guerrilla conflicts, and modern asymmetric warfare. This is a brief overview of human military development, Park explained. Every technique we use during your games can be found in our historical records. We did not invent new methods for your challenges, we simply applied existing knowledge. Private. Cho So-young activated another display showing human conflicts from the past century. These are examples of what we call conventional warfare between human nations. The psychological tactics, cultural analysis, and intelligence operations you found disturbing are standard procedures in human military doctrine. Corporal Han Wubin added his own presentation showing modern military technology and strategic thinking. The capabilities we demonstrated represent approximately 5% of current human military potential. We were operating under significant restrictions and using improvised equipment. The alien representatives were studying the displays with what appeared to be growing horror. The tree-like being spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. You mean that your species regularly employs these methods against your own kind? Yes, Captain Lee answered simply. Human civilization has been shaped by thousands of years of warfare between competing groups. We have developed these capabilities because we needed them to survive conflicts with other humans. The flowing metal creatures harmonized in tones that sounded distressed. Your own species fights wars using psychological manipulation and cultural warfare. Lieutenant Kim Yeho nodded, among other things. We also use economic warfare, information warfare, technological warfare, and various forms of political manipulation. Different human societies have been competing with each other for resources and territory for our entire recorded history. Creature that looked like a living crystal formation spoke for the first time. This explains the systematic nature of your approach. You were not learning our weaknesses for entertainment. You were conducting standard intelligence analysis because that is how your species approaches any potential conflict. Correct, Captain Lee confirmed. When we received your invitation to participate in war games, we prepared the same way we would prepare for any military engagement. We studied our opponents, analyzed the environment, and developed strategies to achieve victory with minimal casualties. The jellyfish creature pulsed deep red again.
Ow.
But you were playing games. There was no real threat to your civilization. Captain Lee's expression became very serious. You invited us to demonstrate our military capabilities against unknown alien species. From our perspective, this was a first contact situation with potential military implications. We treated it as seriously as we would treat any threat to human survival. The gas cloud ambassador swirled frantically. You thought we might be enemies? We thought you might be testing us to determine whether we were worth conquering, Sergeant? Park replied matter-of-factly. The war games could have been reconnaissance for a future invasion. We responded accordingly. The chamber erupted in alarmed discussions between different species. Captain Lee waited patiently for the noise to die down before continuing. However, we now understand that your intentions were peaceful. We are willing to join galactic civilization and share our knowledge and capabilities, but we will not pretend to be less than we are. The Crystal Butterfly spokesperson seemed to be consulting with other representatives before responding. Assurance can you give that humans will not use these capabilities against peaceful species? The same assurance that any species gives, Captain Lee replied. We will follow galactic law and honor our agreements. But we will not handicap ourselves or hide our true nature. Other species will need to understand what humans are and decide how they want to interact with us. The tree-like being asked the question that everyone was thinking. What happens if human civilization faces a genuine threat? Captain Lee looked around the chamber slowly, making eye contact with representatives from each species. Then you will discover what humans do when we are not playing games. The final vote took 6 hours. When it was finished, Earth was granted full membership in galactic civilization with no restrictions on human capabilities. But the agreement came with an unusual addition, a formal recognition that humans represented a new category of galactic citizen that required special diplomatic protocols. As Captain Lee and his team prepared to return to Earth, the Crystal Butterfly approached them privately. I must ask, the alien said quietly, were you really operating at only 5% of your capabilities? Captain Lee considered the question carefully. In terms of our tactical approach and strategic thinking, yes. But we were also operating under artificial constraints with improvised equipment against opponents we knew were not genuine enemies. If humans faced a real threat to our survival, he paused and looked directly at the alien. I hope you never find out what we are capable of when we are truly motivated. The transport beam activated for the final time, taking the human team back to Earth. But now they returned as representatives of a species that had accidentally terrified an entire galaxy simply by being themselves. Within a year, several alien species had quietly approached Earth, requesting military consultation and defensive alliance agreements. The galaxy had collectively decided that if humans were this formidable by nature, they would rather have them as friends who might share diluted versions of their capabilities than as potential enemies, who might develop worse ones. Captain Lee Dayon became Earth's first galactic military advisor, a position that was created specifically for him. His team members took leadership roles in various interstellar organizations, sharing human knowledge while carefully monitoring which aspects of human capabilities they revealed. The cosmos learned to coexist with the reality that its newest members were a species that had spent